Get him the hell out of here, right?
MS-13 is as violent as gangs come.
So what kinds of things do you have to do as a gang member?
We start by selling drugs, and after that, you become a hitman.
So you guys are both hitmen?
Yeah.
This week, MS-13 on their own turf and in their own words.
What do you think people don't know about the practice of psychiatry that they ought to know?
They don't know that psychiatric drugs are all neurotoxins. They don't know that they aren't correcting biochemical imbalances, they're causing biochemical imbalances.
Dr. Peter Bregan has been called the conscience of psychiatry. He thinks our efforts to mend the mind have gone mad with medication.
It's kind of like being in a video game, albeit one with hefty consequences if you lose.
And we take a ride on the wild side, mounting up and taking on the scooter rush hour in Saigon.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Our politicians continue to debate what to do about illegal immigration, how best to secure our southern border, and how serious the problem is. Illegal crossings have surged, and President Trump has declared a national emergency. What's driving so many migrants to risk their lives and join caravans to enter the U.S.? And is there reason to be concerned about the criminal elements coming with them? Jonathan Elias traveled to Honduras to find out.
It is midnight here in San Pedro Sula. This is where it all begins. Everyone here is heading north, and if you talk to some, they'll admit that the ultimate goal is to make it to the United States. This is the reason I'm leaving, this man told us. He's trying to make it to the U.S., he said, because low wages here make it impossible to support his young family. This man says when local gangs see his tattoos, they assume he's from a rival gang, so his only choice is to leave.
Those can get him killed?
Sí.
Muchas gracias.
Honduras is one of the poorest and most violent countries in Central America, surrounded by Spanish-speaking nations with stronger economies. Panama and Costa Rica have generous asylum policies, and to the north, Guatemala and Mexico have been open to migrants in recent years. Despite that, many still choose the long, grueling trek to America.
It's been drilled into our heads since forever that it's the best nation in the history of the world. Why wouldn't anyone who's trying to save their life go to the best place?
Honduran photojournalist Tomas Ayoso has been documenting this flight for 4 years.
It is an exodus. At some point, only biblical terms come to mind when you talk about it.
A project he's entitled The Right to Grow Old.
These are the feet of a 15-year-old boy who walked through Mexico as he was trying to get away.
In flip-flops.
That's what he had.
President Trump calls it a border crisis and a dangerous threat to public safety. But how many crimes are committed by illegal immigrants? The Government Accountability Office, a nonpartisan agency that works for Congress, found that between 2011 and 2016, 35% of inmates in federal prisons were criminal aliens, most coming from Central America and nearby countries. And during that time, the federal government paid about $1.5 billion each year to keep them behind bars. MS-13 got its start in Los Angeles, but is rooted today in Central America. It's become a dangerous export to the U.S. and the biggest target for President Trump.
Get him the hell out of here, right? Get him out.
MS-13 is as violent as gangs come. Their motto, kill, steal, rape, control. The White House says there are about 10,000 MS-13 gang members in the U.S. today. On Long Island in 2016, MS-13 members used machetes and bats to kill 16-year-old Nisa Mickens and her best friend Kyla Cuevas. In Maryland in 2017, these 3 MS-13 gang members were arrested for brutally stabbing a victim more than 100 times, cutting off his head and cutting out his heart. Nationwide since 2012, an average of about 35 murders have been tied to MS-13 every year. There are thousands of MS-13 members here in Honduras, and we arranged for a rare sit-down with 2 young members.
Right now we're heading into an area that's completely controlled by the gangs. We're going to sit down with 2 members of MS-13, and we were told when you come into the neighborhood you have to have your windows down so they can see who's coming in.
We met at an abandoned home, and we were warned not to videotape anyone until the gang members could cover their faces.
How old are you guys? ¿Cuántos años?
18.
On the left, an 18-year-old. On the right, he's 20. They've been MS-13 members for more than 3 years, both sicarios, Spanish for hitman.
So what kinds of things do you have to do as a gang member?
We start by selling drugs, and after that, you become a hitman.
So you guys are both hitmen? Yeah. Who do you kill, though?
Anyone who's not part of the gang.
So who tells you who to kill?
The boss shows us a picture and says, you need to do this and this and this, and we go do it.
They claim they are paid $1,000 for every killing.
Do you guys ever feel bad?
No. In this life, there is no feeling.
Hours before this meeting and across town, the Honduran military police showing off the results of a 2-year investigation. 10 gang members wanted for drug sales, extortion, and murder. The very same crimes they're committing in the U.S. The aggressive crackdown here has helped cut homicide rates in half, but MS-13 remains as powerful as ever. Detective Cesar Ruiz told us that they're not street thugs. They're a well-run organization.
So MS-13 is structured in such a way that they have their own doctors, their own lawyers,
in some cases,
their own nurses,
in some areas.
And these are their members that have trained to do this.
Yes. Yes. With the money, because they have the money.
MS-13 made up just over half of all gang members caught at the border in 2018, more than 400 of them. Others are known to have entered the U.S. illegally.
Have you guys ever been to the United States?
No, we cannot go. We are part of the gangs here. If you go without permission, you get killed.
The threat of more sneaking into the U.S. is one of the reasons President Trump wants to build his wall. Detective Ruiz understands how difficult it is to get rid of this gang.
I compare them as the ants. You can kill some ants, but a few minutes later, you will see a lot of ants coming from the bottom of the earth. It's the same with them.
Do you worry that you'll end up as one of the victims?
We don't have that mentality. When you're in the gangs, you know that can happen. You don't have to feel fear about that.
What do you want people now to know about MS-13?
MS-13 is the best and only gang out there. Once you're in it, it's your family. It's your life. There is no leaving it. We'll put down all rivals because MS-13 is the strongest gang in the world.
The U.S. has poured millions of tax dollars into this country to help turn things around. American Kurt Verbeek founded an organization called the Association for a More Just Society. He receives nearly half of his funding from the U.S. government. He's been working to change things here for decades. He put together a group of investigators that's going after killers and corruption, starting here in the neighborhood where he lives.
You cut murder by 80%.
By 80%. Yep.
That's a big chunk.
Yep.
His team is replicating that success in communities all across the country. Something else Kurt helped change: the police. As these new recruits are gearing up to fight crime, he and his team helped convince the Honduran government to purge thousands from the national police force.
And they've ended up firing over 5,000 cops out of
5,000 cops
out of the 13,000.
Nearly half the department was fired.
Almost half of the police force.
But despite the changes, despite the new opportunities, the exodus north continues. On our visit, we met 17-year-old Axel and his 14-year-old girlfriend. They were leaving the day that we met them. The gang was recruiting him, and he said no. That's an answer, he says, that will get him killed.
You know it's a long journey to get to the United States.
Yes, it would be better for us to make that difficult journey many times than staying here and losing our lives, he told us.
What do you worry about?
That we can die along the way, she said. They zip up their worldly possessions into 2 small backpacks. say their final goodbyes, and walk off to an uncertain future.
What do you think about right now when you watch him walk away?
Oh, tanto peligro en el camino.
All of the dangers that they're going to have to face along the way, she told us.
When do you think you'll see him again?
No sé.
I don't know.
No sé.
I don't know, she said. Axel told us all they have now is each other, what's in their backpacks, and God.
Between there and here, there are other safe countries. Why don't they stop in Mexico, for example?
Well, it seems like it would be a natural transition, given the fact that those are Spanish-speaking countries as well, and they do have sort of open borders for immigrants. A lot of them do stop, but a lot more because for many years, 20, 30 years, people from Honduras have been coming to the United States for opportunity and finding it. And so they get word back, there's opportunity in the United States. Come.
Really interesting story. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Ahead on Full Measure, mental illness is commonly treated with drugs, but wait until you hear what one world-renowned psychiatrist says about that. Antidepressants and other drugs for psychiatric conditions are credited with improving and saving countless lives. But what if that's not the whole story? Today we get another view from psychiatrist Dr. Peter Breggin, author of Medication Madness and director of the International Center for Patient-Oriented Psychiatry. He says his profession has gone mad with medication.
Some people call you the conscience of psychiatry.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I got that name in the early 70s when psychiatric brain surgery was coming back. It's called lobotomy, and it's mutilation of the highest centers of the brain, one of my profession's real atrocities. And when I heard it was coming back, I said, not this time. Finally, one psychiatrist is going to say no. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I conducted a 4 or 5 year campaign and stopped most of the lobotomy projects in the Western world, and including at Harvard, and including some that were funded by the federal government, by law enforcement, and including some on little black children in Mississippi.
What do you think people don't know about the practice of psychiatry that they ought to know?
They don't know that psychiatric drugs are all neurotoxins. They don't know that they aren't correcting biochemical imbalances, they're causing biochemical imbalances.
I read that in 50 years of practice, you've never placed a patient on drugs.
That's right. As soon as I got through with my training, I knew enough to not give people drugs, but I specialize often in taking people off of psychiatric drugs. So almost everybody comes to me on psychiatric drugs, so I have a huge amount of experience. I've written the only book on psychiatric drug withdrawal. Isn't that amazing? There's only one book on psychiatric drug withdrawal.
What did the Prozac experience teach us, and what was your role in that?
Well, I was appointed by a federal court to be the expert for all the combined suits against Eli Lilly concerning Prozac. So I was the first person to go inside the corporation and look at all their records. So Prozac was essentially approved in combination with addictive sedatives. It was also obvious early on that the drug had amphetamine effects. The chief investigator said and wrote, this drug has amphetamine-like effects. We need to put this into the label. It can make depression worse, it can make people agitated, make them angry, might increase the suicide rate. But the FDA wouldn't allow into the label what its chief investigator into adverse effects was telling them. So from the beginning, it was all a house of cards. And as for its being useful, I looked it over carefully, analyzed the statistics, and said the drug actually doesn't work. It's about as good as placebo. Now, placebo will help anywhere between 40 and 80% of people. So it's a huge effect. And that's especially with depression, because depression's not about a biochemical imbalance. It's about hopelessness. Depression is part of the human experience. But if you're a dour doctor with a notepad or behind a computer and a big row of credentials to show how high and mighty you are, and wearing a jacket and a tie, which I don't do, and you are automatically feeling inferior to the guy, and then he tells you you have a biochemical imbalance, what is more hopeless? what is more hopeless? So it increases the depression, and you end up obediently taking the drugs, and then you get worse.
Is it hard to be sort of an outsider within your profession? You're criticizing your colleagues, people that you see and work with and know about you. How is that?
Well, imagine the worst movie you've seen about whistleblowers. All of that has happened to me. I don't think I want to talk about it on the air other than say you imagine it, it's happened. The biggest mistake they made, though, was they went after my medical license for remarks I made on Oprah Winfrey.
Dr. Peter Breggin, welcome.
And Oprah loved me, and I loved Oprah, and Oprah backed me, and we ended up winning this license attack, and I got so much publicity from it that I got my first best-selling book out of it.
What is the most promising medical treatment you see today for people with mental disorders or mental illness?
There is no promising medical treatment, and probably there never can be a promising medical treatment, because to take a subject that has to do with free will, love, the principles we live by, the experiences we've gone through, and to say it's medical and to do something to the brain is counterproductive. What you need to encourage people to do is to believe they have all the brain they need. In fact, if they just stop drinking so much, or if they just stop their drugs carefully, you gotta stop drugs carefully with good supervision, and if you do that, your brain's gonna come alive and you'll be able to deal with your issues.
The FDA has a different view than Dr. Breggin. It says all approved drugs are safe and effective. Coming up on Full Measure, your tax dollars for mariachi bands and studying wine? A new report with some surprising findings. In this week's Follow the Money, an inside look at how your tax dollars are being spent for the arts in ways you may not have imagined. It's Volume 4 of Federal Fumbles, released by Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford.
The masters of mariachi, and you're paying for it. Last year, the National Endowment for the Arts awarded 50,000 tax dollars to a California city for its Mariachi Master Apprentice program. Mariachi is a type of traditional Mexican folk music, usually performed by a strolling band. The program has received $725,000 in federal grants since 2001. The Endowment for the Arts also awarded $50,000 for a PBS series about crafting. The series has received $1.7 million tax dollars since 2005. And your money spent to study Russian wine. The National Endowment for Humanities awarded a $50,400 fellowship to study the Russian wine industry in 2017.
Senator Lankford says part of what's leading to the fumbles is lack of transparency. He's proposed the Taxpayers' Right to Know Act to create an online catalog where the public can track federal programs, what they spend, and where they spend it. Coming up on Full Measure, it's on the bucket list for adventures in Vietnam. The Scooter Challenge. Scott Thuman takes the risky ride next. Next week on Full Measure, you see them every day. TV ads for prescription drugs. The U.S. is one of the only places in the world that allows prescription drug ads on TV. We'll investigate why some insist the marketing amounts to a health risk.
It's exposing patients to drugs that are they're the newest drugs, so we often know the least about their safety because they haven't been on the market for a while. And often there are older alternatives that may be equally effective and safer.
We investigate the pill pitch next week on Full Measure. When President Trump met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un in Hanoi, there was a rush of reporters to Vietnam. For the American press, it was probably the most attention paid to the country since the Vietnam War over a half-century ago. While there, our own Scott Thuman went native.
This is Saigon, where the post-war gritty and the glitzy coexist. Flashy music videos take over streets and luxury yachts cruise by. Even even before we left the States, and everyone we met on the ground told us we had to do two things in Vietnam. One of those was on two wheels.
It's kind of like being in a video game, albeit one with hefty consequences if you lose. Game over would be bad here, but the point is, you're always working at it. You're always doing something to keep the game going. Like dodging a bookcase. It's great. It's just great. All right, so these are the parts that are the diciest. This is when you have to merge with an entire second lane of mopeds and of course cars, just to make it a little more tricky. You find a seam and you're good. First time riding a moped in Vietnam. It's a little crazy. Not sure she understands, but she understands crazy. They use the sidewalks. That doesn't mean for walking. Watch out, pedestrian right here. Bye. If it starts to get jammed up at any point, everyone just bails, gets on the sidewalk, and then finds another spot to get back on the main road. It's just, it's a lack of eloquence here, but it's just cool. Everything about it's cool. Hi, how you doing? Trying to make friends out here. No one's unfriendly. It's just they're on their commute, and I'm trying to have fun. Different goals. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah?
And you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. It's funny because everyone I know who I talked to and told I was coming to Vietnam, they all said, be careful of all the crazy scooters. I can't imagine coming here without getting on one. I would feel like I completely missed out on the experience of really feeling what it's like to some degree to be a local. Head-on traffic here. That was my elbow against the van. All right, 7 seconds till we take off again. Time to get the nerves up. Now it's night driving, a little different. See you later.
In Saigon, I'm Scott Thuman for Full Measure.
Once again, risking his life for Full Measure. That's Scott. We'll see you next week, everybody.